Hey everybody, welcome back to the Maple Grove Scripture Reading Podcast. Hope you had a great weekend as we pick back up with the book of Exodus. And today we're going to quickly recap the reading that we had over the weekend and then review the reading for today as well. Now, over the weekend, we read through 6 chapters 22 through 27, and then we had 2 more today in chapters 28 and 29. So just going quickly through these chapters, chapter 22 really is continuing with the talks of the law, or continuing with God giving the law. And in here, you have laws about protecting property, things like paying restitution for theft or the destruction of property, etc. Then you also had laws on social responsibility. In chapter 23, we see laws for justice and mercy, but then we also see Sabbath laws. For example, the Israelites were to work their fields for 6 years and then let it rest for a 7th year. So there was a Sabbath in the land, kind of giving the land an opportunity to recover from planting and everything. And then they were also to do 6 days of work and then rest on the 7th, following the model of the Lord in creation. Then we're given a description of the 3 harvest festivals. You've got the festival of unleavened bread, you got the festival of the harvest, and you've got the festival of ingathering. And then it says that the Lord's angel is going to prepare the way. So the Lord was going to send the angel of the Lord to lead the Israelites into the land of Canaan. Now they're told not to worship the gods of the people in the land that they're headed to, into Canaan, because there are people there who don't worship the Lord. And God tells him that he's actually going to drive those people out ahead of them. We go into chapter 24, and we see the covenant with the Lord and his people being renewed. And then Moses goes to the mountain and to be with the Lord, to get all of these laws written down on the tablets, or at least the 10 commandments on the tablets. But he goes and spends time on the mountain with the Lord. He actually spends 40 days and 40 nights. It's a long time up there. Well, then we move into chapter 25, where the Lord is again going through some of these. This isn't really laws, because we're actually moving into the construction of the tabernacle. And God says that the Israelites should bring offerings for the materials that are needed to make the tabernacle. And then he gives very detailed instructions for creating the pieces which will be part of it. For example, the Ark of the Covenant, and that would be where the Lord would meet with Moses or whomever. And then you have the table where the bread of the presence is going to be placed. And then you had the lampstand. And then in chapter 26, you've got the instructions for the tabernacle itself. So you have the dimensions and the curtains and the acacia wood and all of that, the rooms where you have the holy place and the most holy place. And so you got all those detailed instructions. And then in chapter 27, you've even got more instructions, this time for the courtyard of the tabernacle. And you've also got instructions for the altar on which the offerings would be sacrificed and burned. Then there's the oil for the lamps, which were to be kept burning in the tabernacle from like dusk until dawn. So then we get into our reading for today. And in our reading today, we start in chapter 28. And Aaron and his sons, they are called by the Lord to serve as priests. We then get instructions for the priestly garments that they would serve in. And there's even a more detailed explanation for the different pieces, like the ephod and the breastpiece. The ephod had stones in it, which represented the 12 sons of Israel, and the breastpiece was really for decision-making. It had these things called the Urim and Thummim. I have no idea if I pronounced those correctly, but it's probably more like Urim and Thummim. But those were the means for making decisions. So they're like dice, which were used by the high priest. It might have been coins as well, but they were basically used by the high priest to determine the will of God. In chapter 29, we get instructions for the consecration of the priests, with Aaron being dressed in the high priest's garments. He'd be the first high priest. Then the Israelites were to ordain Aaron and his sons. And this involved sacrificing a bull and 2 rams. And there were things that they did with the meat as well as the blood. Like the meat was offered as an offering to the Lord, and the blood of the rams was sprinkled on the altar as well. touching like the right earlobe and the thumb of the right hand, the big toe of the right foot. I'm sure there's symbolic meaning to all of these things, but they were also to sacrifice a bull for 7 days as a sin offering to purify the altar, to anoint it and consecrate it so it would be prepared, I guess, for future sacrifices. At the end of the chapter, the Lord says that he will meet with them at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And it ends with the Lord saying that he will dwell among the Israelites and be their God, that they will know that he is the Lord, their God, who brought them up out of Egypt. And the last thing in the chapter, it says, I am the Lord, their God. And in these chapters, we see God implementing the high priest, who is basically the in-between for people and God. Like he would represent God to the people, but also represent the people to the Lord. And this is Aaron and his family, his sons, who God has selected. He has called them to take on this role. And we see that this is a pretty sacred role, just from all the things that they had to do to prepare for it, to be consecrated, to be ordained. Like this is not something that they are supposed to take lightly, which when we get to Leviticus, we're going to see 2 of the sons don't take it as seriously as they should, and there are dire consequences to that. And I got to thinking about it, even as a pastor, I think about the role of the high priest and, what a role that would be. It would be such an honor, but I also can't imagine the absolute weight of it. And, I'm not trying to say that I do what the high priest did, because I do not do that. But there is still a weight to a pastor's role. And so I can kind of understand that just a little bit. Now, we don't have that kind of high priest anymore. That's why I don't view myself or any other pastor really in that role. But we do have a high priest. We might not have the same kind of high priest, but we do have a high priest. And that's Jesus. Jesus is our high priest. In Hebrews 4 and 5, we read about that. And I just want to read from Hebrews chapter 5, starting in verse 7, where it says, during the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. He is our great high priest. Jesus is our great high priest, sitting at God's right hand, and he intercedes for us on our behalf. He still offers up prayers and petitions for us, even now, before the Father. All right, that's going to wrap things up for today. Join us again tomorrow as we continue moving forward. We're going to finish up the book of Exodus this week, so that's pretty exciting. I just want to thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. God bless.